here today to tell some stories of a really good friend and just a great guy that we all work with, either with the Society of Broadcast Engineers or with the California Historical Radio Society, and a lot of us are in both, so it's really kind of an incestuous group. So we have no program. We want to just kind of get you up here to talk about, tell stories and remember art and all the things that we did together. So I was going to start something. How many of you know Art's first name?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was
okay.
going to talk about that. Was number 4 on my list of things to talk about.
Okay, all right. Well, because he hated his first name, that's why we all knew him as Art. But anyway, for too long, Art was the chair of the Society of Broadcast Engineers Chapter 40. And at our meeting on Wednesday, we had a little, I would call it a railroading, but anyway, Steve Lampin now is our chair. So I'd like to introduce Steve, the chair of Chapter 40.
And that immense round of applause was appropriate for this job, believe me. I mean, you realize these guys came to this lunch we had the other day, just on Wednesday, and at the end of the lunch they came up to me and said, "You are now the chairman." Oh, that's an election, you know? There are some countries that's called an election. Right? This is one of those countries, just so you know. So, I want to talk about Auguste. And the way I knew about Auguste Arthur Lebermann is because I read the first phone on the wall at KRE KBLX. And I went, because he had put his whole name down. And I said to him, "Auguste?" And he said, "Yep." And I said, "Well, why aren't you Auguste?" And he didn't want to talk about it. And I said, "You know, Augie Lebermann is a perfectly good name. I mean, I wouldn't have minded having a friend named Augie. That makes perfect sense to me, but this did not go well with him." Yeah, there are lots of Augies. Lots of Augies.
Remy is his friend.
Yeah, and just so you have German background, I mean, who gives a shit? So,
But at one point they did.
they did, at one point they did, yes. And oh, see, that's why, the point.
Yeah. They renamed some streets.
And you see, the strange thing is, here I am, picking up my jacket, and you're saying, what in the hell does this have to do with Art Lebermann? Okay, but this is something, he loved this. And the reason why, this is something my wife bought me. It took her 5 years to buy this. I'll tell you, between you and me, this cost $500. And the reason is, because what's inside this jacket?
Gold bullet.
You know what this is a map of? Occupied Europe, it says very clearly. And further down it says restricted. This is why it's called a bomber jacket, because guys in bombers wore this, so if they were shot down in enemy territory, they would have at least a fighting chance to find their way out. And the interesting thing is, most original jackets you find like this have the lining torn out, which is what the Germans would do. They were nice enough to give you the jacket back, but they tore out the lining. And by the way, it's a silk lining. It wasn't the jacket that was the problem, it was the silk lining that took 5 years for them to make. And you can still buy these. And the amazing thing is, this is as close to original as they can get, and that even down the sleeves, there's more map. The map continues as much as they can, and believe me, if you Google things about maps during World War II, they hid maps in the most amazing places to get them to our folks in the prisoner of war camps, so they would have a fighting chance. So this is something Art would have loved, because this is just about the time he arrived on Earth. You understand? So that's why my jacket has anything to do with Art Lebermann.
What's up the other sleeve?
What's that?
What's up the other sleeve?
What's up the other sleeve?
Yeah.
No.
Portsmouth.
I showed this to my mother, who's 100 years old, not an hour ago. And I said, why do you think there's this map inside my jacket? And her memory is not great. But you can see the cylinder that is left was really pumping as to why there'd be a map. And she said, oh, occupied Europe. That would have to be the war. I said, bingo! So who would wear this? And she couldn't figure out it's people in airplanes. But eventually we got there.
Keep you warm.
So you're welcome to look at this if you want.
Absolutely.
It's really cool just to look at the detail that they put into a map in a jacket.
Can you see the Ghent altarpiece there?
What's that?
Can you see the Ghent altarpiece?
The Ghent altarpiece?
Altarpiece, yeah. They didn't get that close, right?
No,
Okay.
but there's a lot of detail here, I'll tell you. So anyway, that's not, I think what I'm going to do here is I'll tell you the first story, and you'll be so excited by it that you will want to tell your own story, okay? Are they supposed to walk up here, or can they just stand up and tell their own stories where you are? I mean, see, what is this? You can hear me just as well like this, right? I mean, so I don't see why you need a mic. Oh, is this being recorded?
It'll be recorded on my phone, that's it, but it's plenty
Well,
loud.
your phone is recording me, that's what you do. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just tell you story number one. Story number one, for me, starts on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley, where I was working for a guy named Bob Huber. No, I don't see anybody going bingo with the light bulb. Bob Huber. Honest Bob's used stereo was the place that he had. Honest Bob's. You knew there was a problem with anybody. It was right off the bat. But at the time, I needed a job. So I went to him and said, look, I know stuff about electronics. I took a lot of electronics in high school. I went to UC Santa Barbara with an electrical engineering degree, of which I lasted 6 months. So that didn't work out so well, but at least I was motivated. And so he said, you're hired, and paid me the princely sum of $3.50 an hour
Ooh, that's a lot of money
to
back
buy and sell stereos, hi-fis, receivers, speakers, headphones.
One channel? Single channel or two channel?
Stereo.
Stereos, two
Stereo,
channels.
two channels.
Yeah.
Two channels.
No, receivers. I mean, and then we're talking 1975,
Okay,
something in there, I guess. No, 59.
Actually, they were selling quad. Four channels.
Well,
Four
I thought it was
channels.
59.
AM stereo.
And they had stereo records back in 54. Well, yeah, if you go back far enough. This kind of stereo. Okay, so I'm working at Honest Bob's used stereo on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley. And here this guy walks in one day and says, I'm looking for some stuff. And I said, here we are, you know, have a look. And he bought a receiver and some speakers, and that was fine. And next week, he came in again and bought another receiver and some other speakers, or some headphones, or this or that. And suddenly, after like week 4 or 5 of him coming in and buying all this stuff, I was thinking, this guy must have a 25-room house. I mean, where is he putting all this stuff? And so I said, who are you and why are you buying all this stuff? And he said, my name is Art Lebermann, and I'm the chief engineer at the local radio station, KRE-KBLX. And I said to him, words I regret to this very day, I have a first phone. And he said to me, "You have a first phone? Why are you selling hi-fi if you have a first phone?" Because I need the money, you know? He said, "I'll give you a call." And the next thing I know, he was driving me to KTIM in San Rafael. This is Marin, KTIM. Class A FM, 1,000-watt daytime AM, a Bauer 707 kit transmitter at the AM, okay? And talk about the perfect job for someone who didn't know shit. That was me. I mean, yes, I passed the test to get my first phone. What does that mean? That means I know how to take tests. That's what that means, and I was very good at that. But I spent 3 years at KTIM, and of course, Art didn't let go of me once I had done this. He then made me join SBE, he made me come to the Babes lunches, you know, all this stuff is why most of you people know me. If you know me at all, it's from all of these things that I've been here. And so that's my first story of how I got where I am, certainly in broadcasting, was 100% because of this guy. A. Arthur Lebermann, are you next?
Yes.
Please.
I have a couple of pretty good stories, though.
You want a microphone or not?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He's not as loud as you.
I think anybody should take a chance to speak into this microphone.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the one that used to belong to Bill Newbro, but he had a microphone this model.
It was 44BX.
Yeah, which was used in Chicago where he worked there for Amos and Andy. And that was quite a, yes, sir.
This microphone was given to, I believe, Mr. Ruck by Frank Dill. Bill Ruck gave it to Dave Morey, and Dave Morey gave it to us.
So this is something that Frank had used in his point in time.
Has it been re-ribboned?
Has been reversed.
No, it's all original.
But you know, these things, this and the BK5 were tremendous mics, in my opinion. I'm Paul Black. Over 30-some years, I did a lot of work with the SBE Chapter 40. I was chairman for a while. I was treasurer for a long time. And so that's my background. Pardon me. I also did 10 years from 75 to 85 at KFRC. KFRC's transmitter, of course, located right out there in the KRE building, right by the freeway, stuck in the water, surrounded by pelicans in many cases. And as a result, we would go out there fairly regularly, weekly, do maintenance, and always say hello to Art. I became friends with him for a variety of reasons. One of them was because we're both motorheads. I purchased an automobile from him, in fact. I bought his Corvette. We had a lot of other things in common. He was a mentor in many ways, some of them unrelated to broadcasting. But the one story I remember, and I don't think he would mind me telling you, at one point KRE, KBLX, their building, they needed new service, electrical service brought in. I don't know if it was because they needed 3-phase for a new rig or what. But this had to be done at night. It had to be done when they were off the air. Well, KFRC had a generator, of course. You know, filters above Canada at KFRC have an ironclad rule. Nothing keeps KFRC off the air, including a weather balloon with several hundred feet of copper wire, which could be launched to transmit the signal if the tower fell over. I mean, that's how extreme they were. So, Art came to Phil and said, well, we got to shut down, and you know, you need to have one of your guys go out there and overnight and babysit your station. And if you could run an extension cord to us so we could at least run the FM studio, then that would be nice. Okay, so I get out there in the evening, the sun's going down, and here comes the electrician. This is a friend of ours, and he had just recently gotten his electrical contractor's license, days before, in fact. And he's the one that's going to tear out the existing service and put in new service. And for safety reasons, Art arranged for PG&E to come out and pull the power on the pole. So there was no power going in the building. So the night goes on and the night goes on. And finally, as dawn is slowly approaching, the electrician says, we're done, and turns to the PG&E guys and says, okay, turn the power back on. And they said, no. And
Art, and the guy said, why not? And he said, because this is a new installation and needs to be inspected by the city of Berkeley before we can restore power. Oh, yeah. So I called Phil Urza and said, I had been here all night. And the way the union thing was, I was pretty expensive and I stayed much longer. It cost a lot of money. So he said, well, I'll send somebody else out there to spell you. And then he said, let me talk to Art. So we had a long cord on the phone, and Art walked out the little back door at the back of the transmitter shed, talking to Phil about the problem. And I couldn't hear him, but all I could do was see him going. And it was obvious that he had, along with the electrician, not realized what was involved in, getting new service done. And it has to be inspected by your local government agency. So we stayed on the air because of the generator, but I don't think they got KRE back on the air until much later that day, when they finally got a City of Berkeley guy out there to sign off on it and restore the power. That was the one. The only other brief story I'll mention, I ran into Art at NAB. Now, I was working for myself at the time and wasn't old enough for Medicare then. And I was paying $650 a month for a health plan, which it just bleeds you out, So Art said, well, you're 63 or whatever. It won't be long, I'll tell you all about it. So he taught me everything there is to know about Medicare. And I mean, he taught me, because he had been there, done that, and being older than me. And I was very grateful for that. But that was characteristic of Art. He was giving in a lot of ways. He was always willing to help. He mentored me in some electronics and some other areas also. But most importantly, I don't think Art had an enemy in the world. He just was one of those people that is, a rare and unusual individual. So that's my memory of Art Lebermann. And I think that it's unfortunate there aren't more people like him on the planet. It would be a much nicer planet. Thank you.
Anybody else? Stand up.
Oh, he's got notes. We're worried now.
Well, I'm Mark Faley, and I'm a newbie here. I've only been in the area 8 years. And I moved here after spending 30 years in Atlanta. And before that, 8 years in Quincy, Illinois. There's some equipment here with Quincy, Illinois on it. And before that, 5 years in Santa Barbara, working for Mosley Associates. There's also some Mosley here. So I kind of like this. And before that, see if I can remember, I had graduated from the University of Missouri at Rolla, the School of Mines, which I call the Caltech of Missouri. When I lived in Atlanta, I called it the Georgia Tech of Missouri, and it is. And they got a federal grant to put in a couple of 100 kilowatt FM NPR affiliates, and I built the one in Rolla, Missouri. And that was really fun. And we had a pile of Mosley equipment, and they couldn't tell us how to measure it to make the 60 dB SNR for left and right channel DMOD, which is the only FCC requirement. And of course, this is a composite wideband STL. So I ended up twice in Goleta with their STL in my suitcase from Rolla, Missouri. And the second trip out there, Jack Mosley says, "You looking for a job? We gotta shut you up." It was all because of my buddies in the Double E department, which was the building next door. So that station's still on the air back there. It's 88.5, 100 kilowatts. So it kind of tells you how I wove through all of this. I ended up out here. I've got a daughter who went to Cal and has got the house. She slipped a couple times, lives in Lafayette now with her 12-year-old twin daughters. And so we decided we'd come out and be with the grandkids. So here we are. I had been real active with the SBE, going back to the Los Angeles chapter when I was at Mosley, the St. Louis chapter, and the Atlanta chapter, where I was various things. Never chairman, but I was usually treasurer. I like money. And so I went through their certification and stuff when my first phone became useless. By the way, guys, They eliminated the first phone, made it a lifetime general in 1985.
Now you tell me.
85, Paperwork Reduction Act, right.
Yeah.
This ain't worth anything anymore.
But it looks nice.
You don't even need it to keep transmitter logs, okay? All you need is a ballpoint pen and a pulse. And the entire responsibility for that FCC operation lies with the holder of that station license and nobody else, okay? So it's kind of a different world. So the SBE was formed basically with a certification program to fill in for the first phone. And that's how that became real popular. And I'm now the treasurer and certification chairman, as I was in Atlanta for SBE. And I'm always promoting people to go for those voluntary certifications, which aren't needed anymore. You need to have a more rigorous amateur radio license to be legal than you do a commercial telephone license. So I've always enjoyed the SBE. I was on the national board for a while. I also real active with the AFCCE. Dave knows what that is, as consulting engineers. I was just at their annual meeting in Nashville a couple weeks ago. That's a fun group to be associated with as well. Art was extremely kind to everybody. And Paul was wanting to duck out of the treasurer role because that had beat him to death. So I said, well, I'll do it. But I came from most of my life, I've been a vendor. 12 years with Harris, 5 years with Mosley. I did some work with Alex over at Japro for a while. And I was director of engineering for Georgia Public Broadcasting, state of Georgia PBS. It's kind of like their KQED, except there's 9 full power TV stations all around the state, and a satellite transponder, and 17 FM, some of them are 100 kilowatt. So I was on the other side then, and everybody's asked me, what am I going to buy? And we're able to do a design build contract with the state of Georgia, because we use people in the law department there. They were called special assistant attorney generals, the lawyers that we used. And one of them happened to be the president of the Design Build Association of the United States. And I don't know if any of you have been through design build, but back when I was a vendor at Harris mainly, you'd write a spec to buy what you wanted to, and usually it said RCA on your forehead, okay, and RCA colors. Well, if you go design build, it's like a commercial build. You can buy what you want to, particularly when the lawyer for the states stands behind you. So that was a $32 million design build that was not protested, which was phenomenal in the state environment. I was pretty proud of that. So I ended up out here and showed up at the SBE meetings and met Art and the usual suspects. And I ran into Steve as being a vendor with Belden. We ended up on some panels together. There was one meeting, it was down at Harmonic in San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, was that an SBE or a SMPTE meeting, something like that?
Yeah, Cynthia, I think, yeah.
So here I'm sitting next to this guy, and I said, I don't know, I didn't know you lived here. Then I found out he's a native. And,
6 generations.
yeah, quite the natives. So I don't have any native stories like all you guys. I can tell you where all the transmitters are in St. Louis and Atlanta, though. And New York City, too. I covered that, and I did a lot of the DTV stuff going up on Empire and the Old World Trade. When I was with Harris, that was my beat. So that was a lot of fun. The Gates board downstairs has a special place in my heart, because when I was in high school, I got a job with my third form broadcast endorsement at a station in St. Louis. It was 100 kilowatt FM, 98.5. It was called K-Arch. They were building the Arch back then in the 60s. And it had a Gates studioette, and it had a Schaefer remote control, turntables. And this guy was so cheap, we didn't have cart machines. We had little 3-inch reels on Sony 250 and 350s that he traded out for us. That's why we were a trade out with. And so I got my first peek at, like the Schaefer remote control with a stepper relay. I don't think you've got one of those here, do you? What a piece of work that is.
Class D stepper relay.
It is stepper relays like pinball machines. So, but I went behind this maze of wiring on this Gates board, which was in Clayton, which is a real nice part of St. Louis County. And the transmitter was in East St. Louis, across from the Arch. It was a daytime kilowatt 690. with 10 bays of FM, horizontal only up on it, and a Federal Electric transmitter, and Southwestern Bell hard DC lines for everything. This is in the 60s. So I went around the back of this thing, and it says Gates Radio Company, Quincy, Illinois. And I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. I knew where Illinois was. But so I went home and looked it up in my Encyclopedia Britannica Atlas. It's only 100 miles north of me. So me and another friend that played with CD radios and stuff, we hopped in the car and went on up there and knocked on the door at 123 Hampshire Street and got to meet some of that was the factory at the time. So I go way back with him. That was probably in 68. So I've been a customer of theirs, an employee of theirs, a competitor of theirs, and I really have a special place in my heart for Gates Radio. And I met Parker Gates before he passed away, and some of his children and stuff that were there. So that was kind of fun. But when I saw that board downstairs, and I applaud you guys for having relics like that. There's a Mosley remote control down there, a WRC-10, which isn't too much different than a Schaefer. Now it was the predecessor to the TRC-15. And there's also a Gates stay level downstairs. Right? Well, there's a Volumax also, but this is a Gates stay level, which is a compressor. And we had Bob Orban give a presentation to this SBE once, because he lives on the peninsula somewhere. And we were talking about what's your favorite audio compressor and stuff. And I had a stay level at the student station at Missouri. And also I did some weekend desk jockey for a 5 kilowatt daytime 2 sticks. So you needed to have a first phone to be a disc jockey. And if you ever listen on the weekend to those stations, they had rotten announcers. And I was one of them. But this guy was the aficionado for a Gates stay level. And of course on AM you want to peak it up, but I guess he wasn't doing asymmetric peaking and all that yet. This was back again in the 70s. So he had that stay level all cranked up, and he had the ABC Contemporary News, and he joined a minute or 30 seconds early. That stay level and just pulled it out of him. And he was nothing but noise modulating. And then he signed off like 5 o'clock, whatever local sundown was. And he had a jingle still embedded in my mind. Went like this: KIRL St. Charles. Away it went. I think they're still on air as a religious station or something. So anyway, when I was at college, I got a part-time job for $1 an hour in the 60s at an AM/FM in this little college town of Rolla, Missouri. And he had a Gates yard, monaural yard. And that was fun. It was turntables. He did have part machines. It was 1590 AM kilowatt. And 94.3 monaural still on the FM. And we had the Mutual Broadcasting System and Cardinal Baseball. I'm talking Major League Baseball, big stuff, okay? So it's coming into the yard. And of course you play the trick of going up to the hour, playing an instrumental or something. You got good at that. But both of those services were plus or minus 30 seconds. They came in on phone lines. I didn't even think they were equalized at the time. And if you remember the Mutual Broadcasting System, I came out of DC or something. But what was the thrill of my life, being a Cardinal baseball fan, was to be sitting there with that Gates yard, waiting for Cardinal baseball if it hit during my shift, and hearing, "Hello everybody, this is Harry Carey." It's Cardinal baseball. And it just, I still send shivers up my spine. Of course, the Cardinals did quite well. So that's some of my background in radio. Not exactly San Francisco stories, but I've had a good time. But then they sent me to charm school in Paris. Can you tell?
Yeah. I was going to say, if you'd like to hear more stories about art, this is Art's Day,
Right.
and it should be about him, and we appreciate hearing your tales, but it's all about Art Lebermann and the kind of man he was, and the kind of good person he was, and the good things that he did. And I first met Art in 2003 when Jamie back there got us.
Why don't you grab the mic?
That's okay. When Jamie grabbed us and got us into the KRE building, and Art was just he felt like I don't know. he felt like the father of the building almost. And he taught us so much and he helped us so much. And as Paul and I were saying before, he was like a fixture, and it's kind of tough just not having him here. But we loved him. He was a good man. He was a mentor. He taught so much. He shared so much, and we'll miss him. And I hope some other folks can come up and say some nice words about Art.
Wow, this is taller than I am. It's not saying, but now this is a microphone.
Yeah, it's a microphone.
There you go, Paul.
So my name's Paul Marks. I had the joy of working for Art as his assistant for several years. I'm just so grateful to Art. I met him in September of 1977 when I was a senior in high school. And I was a little bit of a disgruntled senior because on my first day of school in my senior year, I found out that the Oakland School District had required an additional unit of science. And I'm like, unfair, how can you do this? I'm starting my senior year. And so I went to a high school where we could get credits by doing research projects out in the field. And I went to our science resources, and there was KRE Radio, Art Lebermann. And I think I'll give him a call. And so I went down there and I met Art, and he was just so amazing. You know, he spent all this time with me, and he shared his knowledge just freely and openly, and took me under his wing, and I got bit by the radio bug. So and Art's everything that that Bill and that Steve and that Mark has and Paul has said he is. I mean, he was just super generous with his time, just willing to help anybody that would come to him for help. And I think he really embodied the spirit of San Francisco radio engineering, just just touched so many of our lives. And it just seems surreal that, he's not here. It's going to take me a while to wrap my head around this, but I'm just eternally grateful, to Art for all that he did, and all the help that he was to me over my career. Yeah, thanks, Art.
Anybody else? I mean, I have more stories to tell of my own, so I might as well not waste them. So I wrote them in my book. It shows you how old I am. I'm writing stuff down still. I have this as well. I don't know what to do with this. I write it down instead. Okay, story number 2 for me is about Ascension Island. I read something that was going around in email saying that he worked at Guam for a while, which I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
But I did know that he was in Ascension Island, and he told me all about Ascension Island. This is a tiny rock of nothing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's one of 5 sites that NASA uses to do all the tracking around the world. And it's just in the right place for that. There are currently 800 people who live there. I didn't realize it was that many, actually. I thought it was less. But when Art first arrived, and I'm not even sure what year this is, when he was with the Air Force, they stationed him there. And he couldn't tell me about the projects he did work on because most of them were military and top secret, and it hadn't run out yet, so I never did hear what he actually did. But I thought the cleverest thing he did while he was on Ascension Island was because it was not legally part of the United States. It was a working island of the military. There was a joint venture between the British military and the American military. That meant you could do anything you wanted to do on
any frequency.
What's that?
On any frequency.
On any frequency you wanted to do it on, exactly. And one of the things that all the housewives came to Art and said, look, we brought our hi-fis with us, but we have nothing to tune in, to play. And he thought about this for a while. And what he did was he scrounged up enough gear to build an FM transmitter. I'm not sure how many watts it was, but it wasn't much, maybe 100 watts. And it was kludged together, so I'm sure if it worked, it wasn't FCC legal, but there was no FCC in Ascension Island, so that's not a problem. And then he fed this thing. He went and got one of those Gerard changers, do you remember these? That you could load up like 10 records at a time. So there's no DJ in this place. It was just a back room somewhere in some lab somewhere. And he would load up 10 LPs. And by the way, the LPs were given him by the wives who needed to listen to something. And so those would last for maybe 6 or 7 hours until they got through. And then if he was clever, somebody else would arrive, turn them over, and play the other halves of them. And that was pretty much their broadcast day. And I think this is pretty amazing that he could get this whole thing to work for a sum total of 0, you know, out of nothing. Build something out of nothing. So that's his Ascension story that I know about, Ascension Island story. Does anybody else have another story? How about how did you meet him?
When?
When? Come on. You want to talk so much? Come on up. Come on, John.
Go out there.
I'll be very brief.
Yeah, right.
Art was actually,
Are you done yet?
And others.
Steve, you want to sit down for a while?
It's gonna be longer than Mark.
Mentored, he was a gentleman of people he worked with. There are some of us who are contemporaries of Art, and he was very, very nice to us. And Art is in the panoply of people like Richard T. Parks,
Yep.
Yeah.
like Howie Amicus.
Yep.
He's basically up there. That's
That's
great.
right.
Okay.
Beautiful words.
Yeah, go.
Beautiful words.
I don't want to let Steve hog the microphone. So the radio part of what we did, you know, and we can tell radio stories just about forever. But one of the things that I really enjoyed about Art was the non-radio stuff we used to chat about. And I regularly, we'd get together, we'd have lunch, talk about this, that, and the other thing. And I do remember maybe during COVID, so it was like 3-4 years ago, you know, we were talking about stuff and not being 30 years old anymore. He said, well, you know, the doctors tell me I'm as healthy as a horse. Well, it ran out too, but in talking about things and talking about politics, really not necessarily DNR politics, but just sort of how things work out. It turned out we had very similar attitudes about looking at things, looking at people, and looking at the systems and everything else. And Art said, hey, Bill, you really need to subscribe to The Independent. Okay, I didn't look into that. That's a libertarian journalist. It's all written by economists at the professor of economy at a university someplace. So it's a fairly erudite thing with a whole lot. It's kind of hard reading because there's so many footnotes and everything else, but those are a fairly intellectual thing. So I started reading The Independent because Art said, it'd be a good idea, and it's really interesting stuff. I don't agree with all of it. And of course, my Tommy Pinko liberal wife thinks that I'm a little bit going off the deep end because libertarians are sort of orthogonal to conservative and
Everybody.
Huh?
Orthogonal to everything.
Yeah, orthogonal everything, but it's very interesting. So it's just because of Art that I started subscribing to The Independent and learning about the economy and how it affects everything and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the bigger picture, and I think that's one of the things that Art was so great at. yes, he could fix anything, no question about that. He was very much into cars, okay, and could fix anything there, and it's not a question. But it's some of the bigger picture stuff, like telling me about the Independent, that made Art, I think, one step above most of the rest of us. And certainly, we heard about at the Chapter 40 meetings, every meeting, it was introduction of what's going on at CHRS. And thanks to Art, I said, oh, you know, that sounds kind of interesting. So I became a member of CHRS and support them and help them fix the really ugly facade that's now gone, you know. And so, and at KRE, it was, I think, better for you guys to have KRE not let you take over the building, because you end up with a much better building now over here. But so there's just all these little things that there's more to life than radio. I know that's hard to say, it's our life. But, oh, thank you, Jacques. I just want to point something out to you. I've known Jacques now for more than 60 years. So,
He was 3 years old, really?
huh? I was in grammar school when Jacques and a friend, Mike Evia, showed up to record the choir. And Ampex PR10s and Altec microphones. And anyway, that's, I can almost say it's all your fault, Jacques, but anyway, Art was just one of those kind of guys that was more of was not just a radio guy, he was a very broad interest kind of stuff. And so that's part of, I think, the fun part of this whole thing. So, Steve, you've got 4 more stories probably.
One more.
One more? Only one?
One more.
Oh, okay, we'll have to come up with more then.
Oh, then you, come on.
I promise you, this is an art story. We've have been looking for something to do to donate something out of SBE, including back to SBE National. But this gathering here and events of the day, we're going to donate $500 to CHRS for a brick with Art's name and SBE. That was decided in a meeting just now. I hope that Paul Marks agrees with that. You were the missing but non-determined vote. Okay. And just one thing on Paul, Art, I didn't interface with him much like y'all you guys did starting in grade school and stuff. But when I did meet him and introduce myself as a SBEer and so forth and so on, and very cordial, and I don't think he ever told me no. Luckily, I didn't ask too outlandish of a request, but I always got his okay on expenditures and stuff, because I'm the Evite and the Zoom queen. And we're going to continue in that now under our new chairman, and hopefully you'll be as agreeable as Art. So far, you haven't.
Thank you.
Well, this is my last story.
This is Lavin's rebuttal.
But it shouldn't be the last story. And this is absolutely true, what I'm about to tell you, absolutely true. I was chief engineer of KJAZ, KJAZ in Alameda, right here in this very island. 1509.5 Webster Street in Alameda. Before I moved it over to Harbor Bay Isle, which is where it was for a while. The biggest move I ever did. But that's besides the point. While I was at 1509.5 Webster Street, I figured out, I learned from Art, who was of course my mentor, that we shared a frequency for our STLs. 951.5, I think it was. And we had the same STL frequency. But I was shooting from Harbor Bay, from Webster Street over to San Francisco, and he was shooting from over there down to
San Bruno.
Thank you, San Bruno, exactly. So it was almost a 90-degree angle, and most of the time, not a problem. most of the time. Okay. The problem was when the fog would come up off the bay.
The scale of reflector wouldn't do it.
That for him, it was a problem. And what would happen is that my receive antenna would then suddenly see two things at 951.5, and sometimes it couldn't choose which one to pick up. And so suddenly, KBLX audio would be on KJazz's frequency, which of course people didn't like, okay? Or at least they thought it was weird. And so we looked at this problem, and the problem was very clear. It's fog. Fog is low stuff. And he was shooting from the roof of the KRE building to Mount San Bruno. And I said, all you need to do is to raise your dish. He had an Annixter Mark big dish, so did I, as big as you could get, and just need to move it up 50 feet or something on your tower, and you'll be above the fog. And so what we did was very simple. We both climbed the tower there with my climbing belt, back when I was young and thin, you know, in those days. And younger, a lot younger than I am now. And we took a telescope, and we literally looked at my site and looked at his site. And it was very clear that the problem is when he went up another 50 feet, that the trees on the median of Highway 80 were right in his line of sight at that point. And then when he was down low, he could miss the trees. But when he went up, suddenly the trees were there. And so I was trying to count the number of branches up the tree to see if I could figure out which branch was the real offending branch or branches. And then what I did, I wouldn't have the guts to do this today, I don't think. I went and rented a chainsaw, and I took my climbing belt and my VW Rabbit, the first car I ever bought with broadcasting money. Great. I love that car. And at Sunday morning at 5 in the morning, I quietly came down Highway 80 to the median, and I pulled off the freeway. There was nobody else there. It wouldn't be this way now. Onto the median, and kind of parked in some bushes there on the median. Got out, climbed up the tree, counting the branches as I went up. And I started to saw all the branches off this tree, one at a time. And I probably cut 20 or 30 branches. I mean, it was a pile of branches at the bottom of this tree. But by the time we were done, and he went up the tower and had a look, absolutely clear as a bell. So that he could do that, he could raise his antenna up, and he did, and the problem went away, and we never had anybody's audio on anybody's other STL. And so it all worked, and this was a thank you to him for all the stuff that he had done for me. Because I used to go weekly for him for my weekly class in AM or FM or STLs or whatever other subject that I knew nothing about. And he would very quietly just teach me one thing after another, which was spectacular.
Steve, what happened when the branches grew back?
I think we were kind of gone, both gone, from the KRE site by that time. Yes.
My 5 years at Mosley had this happen dozens of times, worldwide.
Yeah.
Did you try cross-polarizing the two systems?
We were cross-polarized already.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. That's like,
Before the 20
that's number one. In fact, that's the problem is I was vertical and he was horizontal, which is why it bounced off the fog. You see, that was the problem for him. And maybe if we'd done it the other way around, it might have worked a little better, but No, I just went and cut branches for him instead. And I remember thinking, you know, if I were a highway maintenance guy, and here I am going down the freeway, and suddenly I see this huge pile of branches in this median between the two lanes of the freeway, and you'd wonder, what in the hell?
But you
was
didn't graffiti
this?
the tree. You weren't spray painting anything. They
Well,
didn't care.
nobody ever came and knocked on my door. I never went to jail, so I shouldn't be talking about it now, right? I think the statute of limitations.
The Sierra Club will know this.
Ah, yes, yes. Damage the tree. Yes.
Save the trees.
Okay, so that's my Art Lebermann story. That's all of my Art Lebermann stories. Anybody else have one?
That's pretty cool.
No. I mean, thank you all for coming. This has been wonderful. I wouldn't have missed this for the world. And I'm just sorry Art's not here to listen. Maybe he's listening right now. He's probably having a pretty good laugh to see what he caused.
I think we'll have you come.
Yes,
The individuals who worked so hard to get us here today, I think it's Bill and
Yeah.
I think Mark also. Thank you very much for your effort.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, CHRS.
Thank you.
I am a member of CHRS, although nobody's ever seen me here, so. Yeah, no, I gave them part of my library of books and magazines and stuff when I retired. That was part one. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, nice exchange. Thank you for the.